Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. I see we just got Zuby here in the room. Get him up as a speaker. Super excited for this conversation. I've been a fan of Zuby for years now. First saw him on the Joe Rogan show where he appeared because of his post breaking the UK women's deadlift record by identifying briefly as a woman. Let's see, I'm having trouble getting Zuby up here. So I invited you as a co-host, Zuby. Let's see if that works. Um, in any case, yeah, I really enjoy Zuby's take on living in general, on, what it is, maybe that the world is doing a little bit weird right now, and how to focus on being the best version of yourself, and make a good positive impact on the world. It seems that Zuby's been doing it his own way since he got started. Bit of a renaissance man. How's it going today, Zuby? What's up?
Yo, what's going on, man? I'm doing well, man. Blessed and highly favored as always.
Yeah, it seems that way. So tell me, Zuby, what is your purpose for, being on X, participating in social media, just creating the music that you do and the art? Just talk to me a bit about what it is that you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, sure thing, man. Well, that's an easy answer. It's been the same since I was in my late teens. And my life mission and purpose is to positively inspire and impact as many millions of people as I can around the world through my words and actions. So that started out simply with music. I thought I was going to do all of that just through my music when I was setting out in my late teens, early 20s with that. And then over time, all that's happened is I've added more strings to the bow. So I started my podcast in 2019 and wrote and released my first book then. That's also when things started to, blow up more internationally. And I started getting the opportunity to speak on stages and, meet and connect with all these different people on TV, on podcasts, and so on. And so the mission hasn't changed. My goal is still to positively impact and inspire as many, many millions of people as I can. And the mediums have expanded. But if you think about what I do, some people get confused by the combination of things I do. They want you to just be a musician or just be a podcaster or just be a public speaker or just be an author. You can't do all of these things, right? Because people have these limited mindsets often. But it's all the same thing, man. It's all communication. It's the exact same thing that I'm doing right now, right? It's all communication in different forms, whether I'm rapping, I'm talking, I'm speaking on a stage, I'm writing a book, I'm posting on X or on Instagram or on YouTube. It's all the same thing, man. It's all just communication. And so, we live in a world with a lot of darkness in it. I think that's hitting people very hard right now, given some of the events of the last couple of weeks. And I do my best to be a light in that, not in a sort of cheesy, fake positive way, but in a way that is rooted in reality and rooted in truth, but also rooted in optimism.
Speaking of the darkness lately, it's been something that I've been struggling with as well. Like, how do you maintain a positive outlook and put a positive message out when things are so dark and when, it feels like that's what we should be talking about. Do you have a take on exactly what the world needs right now, or how we can sort of dig ourselves out of this darkness?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that what you say because it's absolutely true. But the thing is, this has always been the state of humanity, if you really think about it. I think that in the modern Western world and in developed countries, we have gotten used to being very comfortable and things being peaceful and not having to worry about where we're getting our next meal or, being shipped off to war or anything like that. But the truth is that, just look at history, man. Look at ancient history, look at modern history, look at the 20th century, even just look around the world right now. And the truth is, there's always been war, there's always been violence and crime and chaos and nastiness. People have done such awful things. Just look at the past 100 years, and thank God we're not living in those moments now. So I think one reason why these things hit us so hard, as they should, is because it sort of reminds us that that still exists. I think we often like to delude ourselves into thinking that human beings have fundamentally changed and that, everyone is good and peaceful and all those bad guys are relegated to history. So when we sort of get these snap reminders that that's not the case, it's sort of like a punch in the gut. And on one hand, it's very good that I mean, obviously, it's very good that we live in much more peaceful times overall and much more prosperous times than our ancestors did. But at the same time, it's important to be aware and to be empathetic and to be sympathetic for the tragedies and sufferings that do still exist. It's very weird the climate we live in because um, I don't know. There's a lot of sort of false compassion and fake sympathy, and all the woke crap that people know that I criticize. It's all this sort of fake sympathy and obsessing over very minor things, right? Things that really are just non-consequential, which is why it's annoying. There are real problems in the world. There is real, crime still very much exists, violence does exist, war does exist. There are people suffering. There are people who don't have clean water to drink. There are people who don't know where the next meal is coming from, and so on. Even in developed countries, we've still got, thousands upon thousands, if not, millions of people who are homeless or who are suffering and so on in all sorts of ways. And one reason why some people think I'm critical of the woke stuff because, that I lack sympathy or something. And it's like, no, I have sympathy, but I'm just quite judicious with it. I don't have a lot of sympathy for stuff that's just unimportant and where someone is just being narcissistic and, trying to gain attention to themselves or whatever. I don't know, they're making up new genders and pronouns or whatever and trying to feel like a victim and claim victim points on that. It's like, man, I have sympathy for genuine victims. There are real victims in this world, as we're very obviously seeing right now. There are people who are suffering, often at the hands of governments or at the hands of, always at the hands of other individuals or groups who are innocent, right? People want to, take sides or be on the left or be on the right or be pro this or be anti that or whatever. But it's like, look, any innocent human being that is suffering, in a true sense, right? They're getting bombed, their families being attacked, they're, all of this stuff. It can be, it's right now, obviously the focus right now is on Israel and Palestine. Just before that, for the past year, the focus has been on Russia and Ukraine. There's stuff going on in Armenia. There's stuff always going on in, my one of my home countries of Nigeria, especially up in the north. There's things going on in Myanmar. There's things happening in other parts of the Middle East. There's always stuff going on. And, it's good that people care, but it's sort of interesting how, the media sort of tells people what we should care about. And it's kind of interesting because you're supposed to, especially if you're deemed a public figure, you're supposed to sort of have a take on everything that the media tells you about and whatever is the current thing. But then um, other people just ignore all the other things that are also going on. And I get that. Like we can't care about absolutely everything, or even if you do, we can't do, there's not much that we can sort of do as human beings about a lot of the situations out there, especially things that are outside our borders, outside of our remit. Even many of the things that are happening within our own nation's borders, we don't have control of. So, coming back to answer your original question, my personal way of doing things is to zoom out and always have gratitude and perspective for what I have and for what we have, and then to pray. Like I pray, I believe in God, and I don't have any control over what's going on in Israel and Palestine. I have no control whatsoever. So I've had people posting stuff that say, Zuby, do something. I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? Right? I can put out an asinine statement that's not going to add anything to the general dialogue and conversation, but all I can do is offer sympathy and offer prayers for the people who are affected. I don't care which side, quote unquote, they're on. I just stand with innocent people. It's the exact same reason. You haven't seen me in the past year talking about Russia and Ukraine and whatever, because my position on all of these different conflicts is identical. It doesn't matter where it is. And, I'm not going to take one side and go against the other side because I always stand on the side of just the regular people.
Yeah, it seems like when I think about just the woke agenda in general, it's like distracting us from the things that we should actually be paying attention to. And it seems like the media is always distracting us from, whatever issue is popular at the time. I think the current thing is how people refer to that. You mentioned that as well. Uh, so I'm curious though, the things that we really should focus on, right? Like, for example, you mentioned that we're living in generally more peaceful times than we ever have before. But we sort of need to, right? If it isn't peaceful, now that we're running around with weapons that could annihilate the entire globe, nearly instantly, then everything falls apart extremely quickly. So it seems like more so than ever before, we need to work on eliminating, to a large extent, the bad actors and the violence, war in general, because it seems to me like it could accelerate quickly or get to a point where things are much worse than they are now if just one or two bad moves happen from the leaders or the countries in charge of making all these decisions. uh, do you have a sense for how people who have influence, or even just people in general on social media, do you think that there's anything that we can do about that, or you think we're sort of just at the whims of people with more power?
I think that the power ultimately always does reside with the people. And I think the problem all throughout history is that most people don't know that, and most people don't realize it, and most people don't believe it. There's always, normal people outnumber, people in power or politicians or whatever, more than 1,000 to 1. With that said, what we can do directly is rather limited. It's rather limited because we don't individually set foreign policy or things like that, or governmental legislation. What I think that we can do, and what I personally try to do, is I focus on, I'm very big on encouraging people to focus on the things that they can control. Right. If you live your life with a complete external locus of control and you're just kind of a leaf that's blowing in the wind and you don't control where the wind goes and you're just floating around there and letting your emotions drive you and your feelings and the media is telling you what to think and so on, then number one, you're not going to be happy. But number two, it's going to be hard to be peaceful and successful in any type of way. And the truth is, I think the way that we genuinely make the world a better place, and I don't say this as a cliche, I say this very, very truthfully. I think that the best way we can make the world a better place is by individually doing the best that we can, right? I only have control over me. I can only speak for myself. I can only eat for myself. I can only exercise for myself. Every post I put on Twitter, every action that I take in the real world, every time I interact with my family members, my friends, my fans, supporters, strangers, whatever it is, I'm putting some energy out into the world, right? And you get both positive and negative ripples out there. I think it's fair to say, by the fact we're even having these conversation and all these people are listening, I've been able to create positive ripples that have impacted millions of people in some way, shape, or form, right? And negative does the same thing, right? If I were just out there using my platform with, across social media, I've got about 2 million followers now, and I were just putting out, angry stuff or hateful stuff, or I'm just randomly attacking people and I'm kind of spreading that energy, then it encourages other people to do the same thing, right? We're all influenced by each other. We're social beings. Even those of us who are less easily influenced by than others are, we're still influenced. Like I'm a product of, yeah, my personality and my DNA, but also, the way my parents raised me, the way my family raised me, the environments and cultures and countries that I grew up in. We're all shaped by all of these things. So what I try to encourage and also just exemplify on a day-to-day basis, and I'm not perfect with this, I'm not Jesus. I try my best to engage people in a manner that is that is righteous. And I don't lie. It doesn't mean I'm always correct, but I do not lie. I don't go on social media and start putting out things that I know are false, or accusing people of things that I know are not true, or spreading false information. Like, I don't do that. It's dishonest. And it annoys me to high heavens. It annoys all of us when politicians do it, when the media does it. when bureaucrats do it, when the CDC does it, whoever, right? We don't like it when they lie to us. So why would you then go in your own personal life or your public life and then start doing the same thing, right? I think we all just need to, I hate the phrase be better, but we all need to do our best to just be better. And the more that we can do that, imagine if everyone in the world were to do this. I know that's a tall order, but imagine if all the, I don't know, there's 8 billion people in the world. Maybe there's 6 billion adults. Imagine if all the 6 billion adults genuinely tried to be the best version of themselves and genuinely tried to love their neighbors as themselves and tried to tell the truth, or at least not lie, as Peterson would say. And they just did their best to do that. The world would look completely different. We'd have a completely different world. And so I'm all about empowering individuals. I do my best to do that. I'm just one voice, but one voice can do a lot. So that's really where my heart and brain is on these things. I don't think it's you can't legislate away every problem. Crime is already against the law. We've already made murder and theft and rape and all of these things, they're already illegal. Sadly, the human heart is sinful. And some people are always going to do that, right? As long as human beings have free will, you're going to have people who do things that are wrong. We all do things that are wrong, but some people do things that are heinously wrong. And that just exists because human beings exist. So all I try to do is just, nudge people in a better direction. And it's why I'm also into, so much into, I talk about fitness, I talk about nutrition, I talk about mindset, I talk about, whatever it is. These are also just reminders to myself to do my best to stay on track. That's all I do every single day, man. I just wake up and I try to do my best. Some days I do better than others, but as long as I'm trying to do that, then I think I'm on a decent path, and I'm glad that it can inspire and help other people, and I hope it encourages other people to do the same. We all need these constant reminders.
I love that. I think you've definitely affected people positively. I see in your comments all the time people, going and working out for the first time, or taking an anecdote that you delivered and applying it to their life. I think that's awesome. I want to talk about your interview with Elon. I want to talk about what it feels like to have 2 million people listening to you across social media. But first, I want to dig into a little bit about what you mentioned, the way that you grew up, the countries you grew up, what your parents were like. Can you give us a little bit of info about what it was like to be little Zuby?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm the last of five children. Everybody calls me Zuby, but my full name is Unzubechuku Olisebuka Udezwe. My first name, Unzubechuku, actually means God's decision. So I take my name seriously. And funnily enough, my last name means our name will spread or our fame will spread. So yeah, maybe I take my name seriously. So yeah, my parents are from Nigeria. We are Igbo. I was born in England, in Luton to be specific. Uh, all the best people from Luton. I moved to Saudi Arabia when I was a baby, and I lived there for 20 years. So my dad's a physician. He's a medical doctor. He worked out there for 2 decades. I went to school in Saudi from kindergarten up until fifth grade. When I was 11, I went to boarding school in the UK. So from the age of 11 to the age of 20, I was back and forth between the United Kingdom and Saudi Arabia multiple times a year. During school time, I'd be in England, and then during the holiday periods, I'd be back in Saudi Arabia. So I grew up actually heavily exposed to, I'd say, four different countries' cultures. So as I said, my family is originally Nigerian. We're also British, and I went to British school from 11 years old, but from up until fifth grade, I was in an American school in Saudi Arabia. And then, of course, I lived in Saudi Arabia. So UK, USA, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, throughout my childhood, those would be the sort of four countries' cultures that I was most influenced by. Anyone hearing me talk right now, you've probably noticed I do not really sound like a typical Englishman, and that is because I didn't grow up in England. And actually, when I went to boarding school, I liked my accent so much that I tried not to lose it. So I'm actually the only person in my family who has this accent. My siblings sound British. I don't. Um, so that, again, that's a sign of the strong will. And so yeah, that was my sort that's my sort of backstory. I did really well in school. In the UK, got exams called GCSEs and A levels. I got top grades in every single subject. I got into Oxford University. I went there when I was 18, graduated when I was 20 with a degree in computer science. And then I worked in the corporate world for a couple of years. And then when I was 24 years old, I went full time with my music. So I left my corporate job as a management consultant in 2011. Yeah, 2011, I left my job. I set up my company, CON Entertainment. And for over a decade now, I've been grinding full time independently. And, it took until 2019, 2020 for things to sort of take off in the way that they have now. Um, but yeah, it's been a long journey, man. I put out my first album in 2006 when I was still in university. So you know, we're now in 2023, so you can do the math on that one. I've spent half my life pretty much pursuing all the things I'm doing now. So yeah, that overnight success is fun.
Uh, yeah, overnight success always happens that way. I think you probably had a moment like that when you were mentioned on the Joe Rogan show, and then you got to, actually participate in the Joe Rogan show and so many other different programs. You got to interview Elon. You're doing your music. Is there like a favorite of, all of the different things that you do? And I wanted to ask a little bit about that computer science background. Do you employ any of that in the work that you do today?
Honestly, I don't use my degree at all. The best thing my degree is for is being able to tell people I went to Oxford and to be telling the truth. That's pretty cool. Um, and I guess just problem solving, man. I don't use my degree directly, but I think that one thing that it really helped with is just problem solving. I guess just being analytic in a certain way and being able to process things in a certain way. I think that just sort of helps with everything. But I mean, I could do everything I do without my degree. I don't use my degree in any sort of um, real capacity these days.
What's your favorite in terms of all of the different mediums that you use to communicate?
Live music, honestly. I'd forgotten that because after they sort of closed the world down for a couple of years. So I used to do live performances quite often, or especially around the UK, but I'd also perform in Europe sometimes. From when I started up until 2019. And then 2020 and 2021, I didn't know live shows at all, right? The world was shut down. Nobody could go out. Nightclubs, music venues, all that was all closed down. So I went like 2 years without doing a single show. And then this year I've done some shows this year. I performed in Texas back in January. I did a small European tour with my friend High Res in July. And then I performed at a festival in California, just in August. So doing all those shows as well, that actually reinvigorated and reminded me just how much I enjoy music in general and especially performing live. So that is still alive and well, by the way. Like a lot of people are asking me, are you still doing music or whatever? I am. The thing, I don't do everything at the same time. So right now I'm working on a new book. So all my creative energy is going towards writing that book, and I'm not really working on music until I get that book finished. So once that book is finished, another album will be my next creative project. But different musicians work in different ways. There's artists who just are in the studio all the time and they're always knocking out new music. I don't really work like that. I'm much more focused. I sort of focus on one thing and keep everything else tiding over as needed, and then I shift my focus towards something else. But I also work quickly. I write songs fast. I write books fast. So yeah, that's where it is. But I'd still say music is my number one love. I love everything that I do, and it's a blessing to be able to make a living doing things that you love. But yeah, music is still my number one.
How do you choose what to focus on, Zuby, with so many different options? Yeah, I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I take it a day and a week at a time. So In any given moment, I'll have a main thing. So this month, for example, my main focus has been on the book. So I finished the first draft 2 weeks ago, and I'm about almost halfway through the second draft. Um, I can actually reveal now because I'm no longer there, but I actually was in Colombia. I was in Medellin for most of this month working on the book. I like to disappear to random places and just write. Um, and yeah, I just focus the attention on what I think is most important at the time. The Of all the things that I kind of have regularly going on, of course, I have my standard social media posting, and then I have my podcast, Real Talk with Zuby. So I do an episode every week. But I often batch record those. So again, when I need to do podcasts, I can spend sort of 3 days, and in those 3 days, I do I don't know six, seven, 8 podcasts. I record them all, and then that gives me, that covers me for a month and a half or a month, and then I turn my attention towards other things. So I just shift gears day to day. I don't have one day where I do music and podcasting and writing a book and doing business stuff. Like I split it out. So whatever is the highest priority thing, I just focus on that. And then when I can shift my energy towards something else, I do it that way. It's not particularly elegant, but it works for me. And I've been doing it for so long now that you just get used to it.
Do you keep like a priority list, or you just like sort of intuitive with it? And I'm also curious, what of all of your different mediums has the most traction? Like what's paying the bills for Zuby right now?
What was the first question there?
Uh, I lost track of my own first question. Let's focus on the second one.
Okay, well, you asked me what's paying my bills. What pays my bills is a combination of things, actually. I don't really have like, I used to have a primary source of income, which used to be music and merchandise sales, but honestly, it's split. It's split between book sales and coaching and consulting and live events. Of course, I've got like my podcast and ads. I've got revenue coming in from YouTube. Now got revenue coming in from X, which is a nice little bonus. Um, I've probably got like 10 to 12 different sources of income at this point. Um, but yeah, it varies. I'd say the biggest ones would be live events, um, coaching and consulting, and book sales. I'd say would be the top three at this moment, but it changes from time to time. When I put out the next book, the book sales are going to fly, and then that'll become the biggest thing for a while. But then if I do a tour or get a bunch of speaking engagements, that might be the primary thing. So it varies from time to time.
I remembered my first question, and it was about how you manage your priorities. If you keep like a list, or if it's more intuitive and you just sort of grab onto whatever interests you at the time. How's
Oh,
your attention managed?
oh, okay, yeah. I'm old school, man. I have a physical diary that I just write in. I've got a week. What do you call it? Like a week to view calendar. So it's just got Monday to Sunday and a few lines for each one, and I just write down what I'm going to do every day, and I tick them off as I go. That's all. And on any given day, I try not to have I try to have no more than two big things. I find that if you write a list with 15 bullet points of things you need to do, then you tend to not get them all done. So I tend to have like one or two things. Okay, I'm absolutely going to do this thing today, and then I'll have some smaller points. But yeah, I just write it down physically. I don't use digital calendars and stuff.
Awesome. So let's talk about your interview with Elon. You were in the Twitter offices before it got, the rebrand to X, and it seems like when Elon was maybe the most busy, when he was spending a ton of time on X and the takeover, you were able to sit down with him for a couple hours at the end of, I think, what was one of his like really long days. Talk to me a little bit about how did you land that interview? And then also, sort of what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, sure thing. So Elon started following me on the app formerly known as Twitter back in February, I think. Last year we had a few interactions. I noticed him reacting and responding to some of the tweets that I was putting out. And then one day, one of my friends messaged me on WhatsApp and just said, "Hey, dude, like, how long has Elon been following you?" And I was like, "Wait, what?" And then I went on his profile and I saw, "Oh, Elon, Elon's following me." So that was pretty cool. And then he'd actually DM'd me because I'd been posting some stuff just generally about Twitter, and he'd sent me a DM, um, kind of asking for some feedback regarding the app and the platform. And so we just got chatting in the DMs, and then I told him about my podcast, and I said, I know you're super busy, but I'd love to have you on at some point in the future. And he just said, sure. So I was like, okay, cool. I've got Elon. I don't know when, but we're going to make that happen. And then, yeah, we stayed in touch over the months. And then I was coming out to the USA in May. So we started talking about potentially locking in a date. And then eventually, yeah, I managed to. When did we record? I think we recorded the podcast in June, if I remember correctly, beginning of June. So it was a cool experience, man. I don't like San Francisco at all. It's one of my least favorite cities in the world, to be honest with you. Sorry to anyone who lives there, but yeah, I went out to SF and spent the day, spent did like an 8 mile walk through the city just to make sure it was just to make sure it was as I remembered it, because I hadn't spent much time there since 2019. And yeah, the downtown area was as dark and depressing as I had remembered, perhaps worse. But I wanted to have an accurate take, not just like a biased one of what I had remembered. But yeah, anyway, we didn't. I think people probably don't know, we didn't actually start that interview until like 9 p.m. So we were originally supposed to start about 7, and he was in a meeting, so he was heavily delayed, and I was just kind of sitting there waiting with the camera crew that was helping me to film it. And yeah, eventually he came in, and we said hi. There wasn't a big gap between the podcast was rolling probably within 3 minutes of us initially meeting each other. So when you watch that show, there wasn't sort of like a massive preamble before it. We just greeted each other. I was obviously happy to see him. He was happy to see me. We just exchanged some nice words, and then yeah, we sat down and we did the interview. So it was a really cool experience, man. Elon's cool. A lot of people ask me, what's he like in person and so on. Yeah, he's how I think I am. What you see is what you get. I didn't get the image that he was sort of putting on any front or anything. He was very amiable. He was funny. Um, he was happy to answer all of my questions and everything. And honestly, it was an honor. Like he's a supremely busy guy. He's one of the big, busiest men in the world, and one of the most successful. So the fact that he was willing to just spend 2 hours, like my podcast has a significant audience, but I don't have the biggest podcast in the world, far from it. So I was humbled and honored that he was happy to just come on and speak, you know, and chat to me and spend that time. It's I don't know what 2 hours of Elon Musk's time is worth, but but he was generous enough to share it with me with no I didn't have to exchange anything for it beyond just kindness and support. So yeah, I was very grateful, man. As I say, I'm a very grateful person in general. These are not things that I take for granted every day. I'm kind of grateful for what I have on every level. So yeah, it was a cool experience. It was a little bit surreal at times. I was kind of like, geez, like I'm interviewing Elon Musk, like this is a big deal. So that was kind of in my head from time to time, but it was cool. It kind of felt like chatting to a friend I hadn't met before.
Yeah, it's shocking sometimes how generous really super busy people are with their time. For example, getting you on my podcast is like a big thing for me, and I'm so happy that you were and grateful that you're generous with your time in that way. Aside from Elon, who, in my opinion, is almost like the holy grail of interviews, who else have you interviewed on your podcast that you really enjoyed and that really sort of help boost your numbers or put you even more on the map?
Yeah, sure. Oh man, I've done over 270 podcasts at this point, so I don't want to like I've had so many great conversations I wouldn't even be able to recall them all. In terms of ones that I can objectively say, like the ones that sort of did the biggest numbers, because that's just an objective measure. Those ones would be like the Andrew Tate one is my most listened to. of all time, as well as the Elon one. Those are the top two. The Matt Walsh one, tons and tons, like hundreds of thousands of people listen to that one as well. Going a little bit further back, I did one with Douglas Murray a couple years ago. That one I remember did big numbers. Um, I think those are I think those are the top five. Actually, some of the ones I did with some of the doctors, like the one I did with Martin Kuldorf during the whole COVID situation. That one got a lot of listens. I did one with Dr. Peter McCullough as well, which similarly got a lot of traction. Off the top of my head, I think those are sort of statistically some of the top performing ones. But I've had so many great conversations, man. I've had ones with people who are extraordinarily well known. I've done ones with people who are, have very small audiences but interesting stories and insights to share. And it's great, man. I love talking to people. I genuinely love communication. I'm super extroverted. I wouldn't be able to do what I do if I didn't genuinely love people and enjoy talking to people because I'd go crazy because I have to deal with so many human beings. But I like it, man. I like it. And if it ever feels overwhelming or too much, I can always just chill out a little bit and then I jump back into it with a renewed energy. So as I said before, man, I'm you won't hear me complain about my life a lot, man. Me complaining about my life feels like a slap in my face to my ancestors and a slap in the face to everyone who's got some real ish to deal with, as we talked about earlier on. So yeah, I don't complain about my life, man. It's all a blessing.
Yeah, conversation is so awesome. Speaking to people, it lights me up. And I think that's why I like spaces so much. It's so cool that we can bring up people from the audience and add them to the conversation, give them a chance to speak with people who they might not otherwise have an opportunity. So if you're in the audience and you want to ask some questions, now's a good time to request speaker and make sure that you have your questions ready. Let's not spend too long introducing ourselves, but feel free to say hi quickly to Zuby so we can get through as many people as possible. I have a couple more questions of my own. AJ, if you could start managing the requests, that would be amazing. So you mentioned the Andrew Tate interview, and I have mixed feelings about the guy myself. I think that people on both sides are probably a little bit too enamored with him or hate him a little bit too much. But I think that he speaks on a very important issue, which is the sort of like the balance between the masculine and the feminine. And I know that you have opinions on that as well. Can you talk a little bit about where you think we're at, in society in terms of that, and what are we struggling with?
Wow, man, that's a huge question. Okay. Um, I think the biggest problem that we're having is that I think we're being extremely dishonest as a society. And I think this is causing all sorts of problems. What's really weird about the way the modern West is right now, and when I say this, I'm talking about, especially the Anglosphere, the United Kingdom, USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and then parts of Western Europe and so on, is we're, when I say we, I don't mean, present company, the people listening to this conversation per se, but society is just, everyone's just lying all the time, right? It's all just lies. We're supposed to believe, okay, so when it comes to gender dynamics, basically, if you're a modern Westerner, you're supposed to believe that men and women are the same, but we're also very different, but also we're social constructs, and like neither one actually really exists. You're supposed to believe all of those things simultaneously. You're supposed to believe that males and females are identical and we have the exact same interests and proclivities and strengths and weaknesses, advantages, disadvantages. Um, you're supposed to believe that. But then also, under some of the narrative of feminism, yeah, there's also the patriarchy and males have privilege and women are oppressed and blah, blah, blah. But then also, what is a woman? Oh, a woman is anyone who says they're a woman. A man is anyone who says they're a man. Men can compete in women's sports. If a man says he's a woman, then we all need to just accept him as a woman and maybe even give him Woman of the Year. I almost used the R word. It's ridiculous. Right? It's utterly ridiculous, right? Like, so I think part of the reason for even some of the mental illness is because people are just living in this weird swirl of lies. There's things that we know are true, but you're like not allowed to say them, or you're not supposed to say them, or if you say them, you get attacked or you get canceled. Um, we've literally had people over the past few years get canceled or lose their jobs for basically saying that like men are not women and women are not men, or men and women have different interests and so on and so forth, right? It's like, and so whenever someone comes through and just says it like it is, whether they say that in a tactful way or in a an accurate way or in a way that's a bit exaggerated or whatever, people gravitate to it. I mean, dude, look, you talked briefly about the thing that it was that blew me up into the stratosphere, right? I identified as a woman back in February 2019, and I broke the British women's deadlift record to prove a point about how men are obviously, lo and behold, are stronger than women, and how the idea that you can just identify as whatever gender you want and everyone's supposed to accept it is completely foolish and stupid. That was almost 5 years ago, man. Almost 5 years ago. We're still having that conversation. Everyone knows the truth. Everyone knows that men and women are different. Everyone knows that men don't have periods and get pregnant. Everybody knows that women don't have penises. No one, you never used to have to say these things. In most of the world, you don't have to say these things. And even if you say them, people will look at you weird because they're like, why are you even saying that? Like, that's obvious. But it's just been this complete denial of reality. And then if you look at the time period from 2020 to 2022, which I politely refer to as the scamdemic, it was just lies upon lies upon lies. Like none of it made sense. The stuff with the masks didn't make sense. The lockdowns didn't make sense. The way the whole vaccine narrative didn't make sense. And then people again were being banned and censored and, pushed to the side and attacked for speaking the truth, for stating facts and for asking questions. And it's all utterly deranging. So I think the root of the problem is heavily based around just this culture of dishonesty, this idea that it's better to be quote unquote nice than to tell the truth. And I don't think that's nice. I certainly don't actually think it's kind. I don't think kindness is lying to people. I think kindness is, wanting the best for people and also being truthful. I think if you're just constantly lying all the time, and it's a problem because the people in power do it too. The politicians are lying every day. The media is lying every day. All of our institutions and the bureaucracy, it's just lies upon lies upon lies. And I think more and more people are noticing that and starting to speak up against it. But I think that's really at the heart of the problem, when people cannot sort of live the truth and speak the truth, or they're afraid to because they think they're going to lose their job or they're going to get canceled or they're going to lose their friends or whatever. These are all genuine fears, and I understand why people have them. But that shouldn't be the case, especially given that the West supposedly prides itself on, liberty and freedom of speech and things like that.
Yeah, the lying to people and pretending like it's kind or nice is something that really bothers me. And what you were just speaking on reminded me of a conversation. I have three girls, and I was at the beach with my three girls a week ago, and I was
How do wait. How do you know they're girls?
well, it says so on their birth certificate, so we'll go with that.
But wait. But did the doctor just assign their gender at birth? Did they get to choose, or are you a
They
bigot?
did not get to choose, and
Wow. I wouldn't have accepted this interview if I knew I was going to be speaking to a bigot.
oh man, it's such a tough subject. I think that people should be able to uh, dress the way they like and act the way they like. It crosses a line when they want to force me to call them one thing or another. And it definitely crosses a line for me when they want to participate in women's sports, for example. I mean, I just don't think that it's debatable that a woman is as strong as a man. It's not. Like I'm a power lifter. I've been a power lifter ever since I was in high school. Uh, I could break the women's deadlift record myself, right? But I'm not even close to the men's. I can't even beat the men's competition in my hometown, right? But I could be a world record holder for women. So I think it's silly to me when it crosses boundaries and you're trying to be nice by lying. I think you nailed it, right? Like it's a lie to say that a woman is as strong as a man. So I had my daughters on the beach and we were talking about the Barbie movie, and the girls were all excited about the Barbie movie, and I kept shaking my head, and I'm like, man, I feel like that movie is telling you lies, and it has an agenda. And they're like, no, 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 it's it's not, it's whatever. But the message just kept going back to how they don't need men, and how men run the world and whatever. And it's like, well, women don't have to do everything. And if you want to be the president, if you want to be a mechanic, if you want to be a doctor, then by all means, I sure hope that you have the opportunity to. But it's also okay to not want to be a construction worker because you are not a man, right? And not that all men want to be construction workers either, but it just feels like there's too much of a you must be like a man, you must be independent, you must be this or that, and that really bothers me.
Yeah. See, do you know what's so interesting is as you were speaking, you actually gave examples of the three simultaneous beliefs that I just said that you're supposed to hold to be politically correct, right? So I have not seen the Barbie movie because I'm a man and I don't have daughters yet. I'm sure when I do in the future, or maybe my niece will drag me to see it or something. But so as it sounds like from the movie makes a real distinction between men and women, right? And men are, the patriarchy and they're oppressing women. So that's the message that men and women are different, right? Even if it's coming from a feminist lens. But then there's also this narrative of, oh, men and women are the same. So, like, yeah, let's have 50-50 in construction workers. Let's have 50-50 in CEOs and all these other things. And then again, oh, yeah, they're just social constructs, right? So you can just identify as which other, and, men are not really stronger than women. And, men can compete in women's sports and do it. This is what I mean. Like, imagine, I know you don't hold these beliefs, but imagine trying to genuinely hold all these things to be true in your own head. You'd go insane. So why do we think so many people are going insane? It's because you're literally trying to force them and bully them to believe a combination of things that cancel each other out. All of these things cannot be simultaneously true. Like it's deranging. Um, and as you said earlier, one of the biggest problems with this is well, two things, more than two things, but one of them is that these lies are actually dangerous in multiple ways. Okay, if you're going to start letting men identify as women and start entering their sports and going into their private spaces and their prisons and whatever, we're literally, there have been instances now in the USA and some other countries where you've now got women getting pregnant in prison. How do you think this is happening? All we did was we moved a male rapist into the women's prison when he identified as a woman, and now, how are these women getting pregnant? That doesn't make sense. Gee, I wonder, right? You've got that going on. You've got males who've competed in MMA, and you're gonna start getting boxers transitioning and American football players. And look, women are gonna get hurt by all this stuff. Like it's bananas. It's so insane and it's so obvious, and I can't believe that this conversation has been going on for over 5 years at this point. We're pretty much up to 8 years of the conversation of like what really is a woman, what really is a man. All this stuff got mainlined in 2015 with the whole, Bruce Jenner to Caitlyn Jenner thing. And yeah, it's just crazy. I don't know. I often say the potential death of the West is going to be its own tolerance, but it's not even really tolerance. It's just foolishness and cowardice. Like as I said, we have real issues that are still going on in the world. So like the fact we're spending every 5 seconds talking about gender and sexuality and trans this and trans that, like it's really goofy. Um, Look, and I have your position. Look, like people can generally speaking do what they want. I don't need to understand everything. I don't need to appreciate everything, but people can generally live how they want to live. Um, but yeah, you can't force people. You can't force people to believe your beliefs, and you can't compel speech on other people, and you can't like change reality itself and try to get everyone to play along with it. That's all extraordinarily dangerous stuff.
It feels
Um,
like we're
and
getting it
yeah,
feels like we're getting in the way of critical thinking and creating like you have a computer science background. Like you couldn't write a computer program that held all three of those beliefs at the same time. It would get stuck in an infinite loop, right? It'd be super buggy software. So it feels like not only are we distracting people and saying like talk about this, focus on this pointless topic, but also we're gonna like overload you with all of this logic that doesn't even make sense. And then you might think in your own head, like, well, if I can't make sense of this, then I might be dumb and I guess I can't make sense of anything. Society wants me to feel this way. So maybe I should just do what society says, and it puts us in a line of lemmings just walking off the cliff. I can't stand it.
Yeah. Yeah, the thing is, as individuals and as societies and cultures, like we do need boundaries. And I think part of the problem we have with the sort of modern Western narrative is the this idea of absolute sort of radical freedom and individualism to the point where you can create your own reality and then try to force that upon other people. Like that's not how it works, and that's actually anti-ethical to freedom. If someone just if all of us, like everyone in this call who's listening right now, right? If we were all on like a field, a big field or a big court, and someone just threw us a ball and they're just like, play, we're all going to be confused because we're like, well, what game are we playing? What are the rules? Can I pick it up? Do I have to kick it? Do I hit it with my head? What are we doing? Are we playing basketball? Are we playing football? Are we playing American football? Are we playing hockey? Like, what are we doing? Right? So to actually even have freedom and liberty, you need to have certain boundaries. Otherwise, no one even knows what's going on. If I give you a menu at a restaurant and the menu's like looks like the Bible, it's going to be really hard for you to pick a meal. And even if you can pick a meal, it's going to be hard for you to think that you made the correct choice. Whereas if I give you a menu and it's got like six options, cool, you pick quickly and you generally feel satisfied with what you have. So coming back to the, particular issue around young men and young women, I think one of the big challenges a lot of boys and girls and young men and young women have is trying to understand what their role is supposed to be in society. People can have all their criticisms of history and of, the way things are done in certain parts of the world and the way things have been done. But if you think of it, up until less than 100 years ago, it was always pretty clear what your role was as a man or a woman in society, right? Boys weren't growing up like utterly confused as to what it means to be a man. Girls weren't growing up utterly confused as to, what it means to be a woman. And it's like we've tried to just like literally erode every single boundary, including the distinction between male and female. And, trying to be charitable here, assuming people thought, oh, this is going to make people like more free and more freedom equals more happiness. And I think that we're kind of seeing the opposite because if you just have completely unrestricted freedom with no discipline and no rules and no boundaries, including sort of the rules of logic itself, then all that happens is you get massive mental health issues and you get a whole generation of people who don't even know like what they're supposed to be doing. They don't know what they're supposed to believe. They don't know what they're supposed to do. And it's not helpful. I think you want to sort of maximize freedom within reason from a sort of legal perspective and a getting away from tyranny perspective. But people also need guidance. People also need to know like what the hierarchy of values is. People need to know what right and wrong is, what true and false is, and know the things that generally are conducive to living a happy life. And that hasn't really changed that much over the however many thousands of years our species has been along, right? The things that actually make people genuinely happy and content with life, like these things have not changed. And of course, we're not cookie cutter. We are all individuals, and everyone can make their choices and pursue things they want and not pursue things they don't want, and so on. But all that can be true, and at the same time, we can recognize, like, okay, for the vast majority of people, these are the things that typically lead to a good, happy, successful, fulfilling life. If you want to deviate from that, cool. Like you can do that within reason. If you feel like you don't fit into this thing or whatever, that's totally fine, right? We shouldn't be trying to force square pegs into round holes. But that doesn't mean that round holes don't exist and squares don't exist. and that the triangle is actually a circle and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah, let's give people, as objective of information as we can and teach them to critically think. That's always been my attitude. I think, we teach people to memorize facts in school and we teach people how to pass tests, but I don't think we teach people how to like filter what's actual information from bullshit and how to critically think about that information to make decisions. I think I'm ready to open up to questions from the audience. Dustin, please introduce yourself and ask Zuby a question.
Thanks, Penny. Yeah, Zuby, I'm loving this talk. It makes so much sense. And so, tying into critical thinking and kind of the nature of truth, I was a Roman history major and I practiced medicine. So, I don't technically use my degree, but I'm still really glad I took the course of study because it taught me a lot about critical thinking. I'm hearing a lot of people knocking college recently. You went to college. Do you use your computer science major? If you don't, was it still worth getting the degree?
I don't use my degree in any real capacity, but yes, I would say that it was worth getting it. I would also say that my view on college/university has changed quite significantly in the 15 years since I graduated.
So how did it change, Zuby?
Yeah, sure. I used to think that most people should go to university. I now think most people should not go to university. I think that there are some people who absolutely should. Okay, I'll give you the way I break it down. I think you should go to university if you meet. I think the more of these criteria you meet, the more you should go, right? So, number one is if you want to pursue a vocation or a career path, such as being a lawyer, a doctor, a surgeon, an engineer, those type of things, please, please, please go to college, right? There are certain jobs where you absolutely, truly, truly, you need the degree, you need that education, right? I'm not trying to go see a doctor who does not have a medical degree. So if you want to do one of those, yes, off the bat, you should go to college. If you don't meet that criteria, then let's go to number two. I think that if you can go to a decent university, um, and you are, let's say you are you're fairly academically gifted, but you're not really sure what you want to do. And I'm going to say, and you can go to university for free or cheap. By that, I mean you can get a scholarship or you have parents who are going to pay the tuition fees and so on, then it's probably worth going, right? It's not going to cost you anything financially. You'll make some good connections, you'll learn some stuff, you'll pick up some useful skills, so on, and you're not going to come out in any debt. I think that's also a good reason for someone to go to university. And then the third one, these don't kind of work in perfect order, but I'd also say if you're going to go, then do a real degree, right? Like if you're going to do STEM or maybe a couple things outside of that that are potentially useful, then that's another consideration. But I think like if you're going into 80 grand debt to study, even not just the BS stuff like gender studies or queer theory or whatever, even the English and history and philosophy. These are real subjects, but I don't think I don't think it's worth going into massive debt for. If you can study it without going into massive debt, then why not go for it? But if you're going to just have the massive opportunity cost and the massive financial cost of those 3 and 4 years, and you're not getting something truly, truly tangible from it that's going to truly, like in a direct way, benefit you or be absolutely necessary for your career, then don't do it. I don't think it's a wise move because the math has changed a lot. So even in the UK, going to university in the UK is cheaper than it is in the USA. But the cost has. So I graduated. Okay, let me give you guys some. Let's frame this. So I told you I've got four older siblings. So when my eldest brother is 10 years older than me. When he went to university, tuition fees were £0. It was all paid for. It was all taxpayer funded, right? Kind of like it is in Denmark, Sweden, and so on. Um, when I went to university, tuition fees I think were £3,000 a term, I believe. I graduated in 2007. From since 2007, the tuition fees have more than tripled. So to go to university now, it costs more than triple what it cost when I went um, 16 years ago. So the price has gone from zero to, affordable to expensive. Meanwhile, the actual value of the degrees has gone down. So you're paying more money, and something similar has happened in the US. I don't know the numbers in the US, but you're paying more for something that is worth less. And that trend just seems to be continuing. So
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.
um, it's not sustainable, first of all. And yeah, that's why my perspective has changed because the numbers have changed and the world has changed. I tell people often that education is cheap, but university is expensive. People say that education is expensive. I'm like, no, no, no. Education has never been cheaper. Education is at an all-time cheapness, right? You can literally learn how to code for free. You can learn so many things for free or for like, a couple dozen or a couple $100. So you don't need to, again, unless you absolutely need that credential, then yeah, most people don't go. So that's why I used to think that yeah, most people should go to university if they can. Now I'm like, yeah, most people shouldn't. Some people absolutely should. Some people it should be a consideration, but I think the vast majority shouldn't. And who knows, by the time I'm a father and I'm a couple decades from here now, and my kids are potentially going to university, like we're going to be in a whole different world by then. And I'd be shocked and surprised if the sort of traditional way of doing university and college and all that is. I'd be surprised if it's even really still a thing, to be honest with you. I think it's going to get massively disrupted. It's overdue.
That's a great nuanced answer. Thanks for the answer.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Dustin. When I didn't go to college, I learned so much. I took an internship. Zuby, you may not know, I wrote code for 25 years, and have, was able to learn all of that on the job. So I was helping my friends with their computer science homework while I was getting paid to write code. And, they graduated with computer science degrees and didn't have a damn clue what they were doing. Meanwhile, I had 4 years of job experience and was building real things and had an actual resume and no debt. The one thing that I sort of wish that I didn't miss out on was the experience, though, right? I think that there is value in being with people your age during that time of your life and learning a bit about like what social life is like post elementary and high school.
Yep, I agree with that 100%, which is why if you can go to college without paying a lot of money for it, I still think it's a good idea, right? If you're 18 years old and you're not sure, what should I do? But you can get a scholarship and study something you enjoy, or your parents are like, look, we're gonna you can go to college and we're gonna pay for it, and you're not gonna come out in this crazy debt. If you're fortunate enough to be in either of those two positions, yeah, why not go for it? But what I would say is I don't think those 3 or 4 years of socializing and having fun. I don't think that's worth going into, 50 to 100,000 plus dollars debt for. If it were free,
Yeah.
go ahead. If you're coming out in massive debt and you're now 3 to 4 years, there's the opportunity cost because you said, right, you in that time that's 3 4 years you could be doing something else. So you really have to, sit down and think for yourself individually, not for society, for yourself or for your child, what actually makes sense because everyone's got a different situation. So, yeah, it's definitely not a one size fits all thing.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's some truth to what you said about how, we may be not even experiencing college in the same way when our kids grow up, just the way that people learn in general with all the new tools that we have and everything else. My hope is that we can have a lot more individual track learning so that people that are ahead of or behind the curve can get more personal attention and spend more time on the things that they need, or less time on the things that they don't need. Um, Diligent, what question do you have for Zuby today?
Thank you, Penny, and thank you, Zuby. I've been watching your podcast all year. My question, well, first of all, I just want to say I have a kid that was affected by gender ideology. It's what brought me onto X in the first place. I fought hard for her, both legally and personally, and we're coming through that battle on the other side unscathed, physically at least. So I'm grateful for that. My question though is, do you feel like wokeness, particularly gender ideology, is losing its grip on the mainstream? We're seeing a lot of corporate pushback and other signs that it may be. What do you think?
Yeah, man. Well, I don't know all the ins and outs of your situation, but I'm genuinely I sympathize with you having to deal with this, man. I can only imagine like geez, man. It's such a crazy modern day problem, man. Like this isn't something that even existed in our childhood. Um, but yeah, I think that we've passed peak woke. I've said this on many shows and many podcasts. When I say that, I don't mean that we have passed the height. I don't. That doesn't mean that people are going to stop pushing it or that it's not even going to intensify. But I think the peak tolerance of it we have passed. Even just between 2019, when I famously identified as a woman and did that deadlift, and now, when I did that thing, barely anyone was talking about this issue. Like it wasn't a big conversation. There were no documentaries about it. There weren't books being written on the subject. People were kind of just either denying that it really existed or thinking it was never going to affect them or that it was all being fabricated and exaggerated. But now people are very, very, very aware of all these things that are going on. They're seeing how it's impacting children, impacting their own children in many cases. And it's all causing pushback, and people are no longer afraid to talk about it. If we'd had this conversation 5 years ago, I might be one of the only people who's kind of feeling able to talk about it and criticize it and so on. Whereas everyone else is like, oh gosh, like, we have to go along with this thing. So yeah, I do think that the pendulum, not just on this issue, but on many of the woke issues, are swinging back. You're seeing the dent being put in some of these corporations by people, not responding favorably to some of their nonsense. And so all of these to me are indicators that a real pushback is coming. I think a lot of parents in particular have been awakened because they're seeing, okay, this is not just some silly thing that's relegated to TikTok or to Tumblr or whatever. This is like a real thing. This is happening in my child's school. This is being put in the movies, in the media. This is something that, politicians are pushing and so on, not just in my country, but in lots of other countries. So there has been a massive awakening. So yeah, I do think that the one thing that also gives me hope, by the way, is woke ideas are so crap that they can't stand, right? If you build the whole house on lies, if you build it all on garbage and lies and things that are not logical and coherent, then that worldview cannot stand forever. We've seen this happen with different ways in the past. The truth stands on its own, and lies can only you can only get away with this level of lies for a while. And this whole thing is a giant lie, and it's going to crumble. And when they don't have the power to just censor and ban and deplatform, then the whole thing's going to collapse. It's a little bit like how, I remember thinking back 2 years ago, a lot of people thought that the whole COVID tyranny thing was never going to end. They were like, "Oh my gosh, this is it! Like we're heading into the gulag, right? We're going full authoritarian." And one reason I always maintained hope is I was like, "Guys, there's too many lies here. There are too many holes for this thing to stand." Right? You can scare people for a while and you can get them to go along with it for a while, but there's just too many holes in the narrative. There's too many contradictions. Too many things are not making sense. They're not going to be able to hold this together, especially once the fear dies down. And we saw that whole thing, eventually it collapsed. It was not a fun time, but eventually it collapsed. And I think wokeness is going to go the same way, at least in its current iteration. People are going to it's not going to happen easy. People do need to speak up. People do need to push back. People do need to resist and offer better alternatives. But as long as those alternatives are rooted in truth and rooted in things that are genuinely good for humanity, then those ideas are going to win in the end.
I feel like when you first made that statement or that post, when you took the action and identified as a woman, that was back when it was like when comedy was becoming illegal, right? Like when you couldn't even say things that were funny if they were slightly controversial without getting canceled. And I'm really happy that you were able to do that. And it seems like at least now the cancel culture is fading, right? And that seems like a
Yep.
critical first step towards getting back to speaking the truth and not enough, no more of these veiled bullshit narratives.
Yeah, well, that's why I say that the people ultimately have the power, because cancel culture only works in conjunction with cowardice culture, right? If people are courageous, both as individuals, but also when it comes to standing by people, right? So I don't know. Let's say some cancellation mob comes after me for the hundredth time. Um, I know that my audience, I know that my friends, I know that people around me. So you guys know that I won't cave. But also, if my supporters support me and don't cancel me, then I'm not canceled, right? You can only be canceled with other people's participation and complicity. If everyone's like, okay, let's throw Zuby under the bus, then okay, I guess I'm canceled. But but if you support people, then that's all it takes, really, because these mobs, which is what they are, they'll come after people and they're relying on the individual they're coming after to not stand by what they said. They want them to, issue a groveling public apology, and they also want to recruit other people to pile on and attack this person and to cancel them, and that's how the whole thing works. But if people are just like, no, actually, you know what? Um, I agree with that person, or even if I didn't agree with them, they have a right to say what they said. I can. There have been situations where I don't know. Someone says something or someone, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not talking about like the most egregious examples of people getting canceled. There's people who should be canceled. Harvey Weinstein should be canceled. But I'm talking about these situations where I don't know. Someone just makes this. So you get ones ranging from someone literally saying something that is true to someone saying something that's like, oh, okay, maybe it's like a little off base, but it's not that bad. Or, sometimes you're like, you know what, actually, yeah, that was a bad thing to say. But you know what? We shouldn't completely destroy someone's entire life and livelihood forever because they said something foolish,
like
right?
like hey
Um,
dude,
wait, say that again.
like hey dude.
Oh, okay, dude. Yeah. Um, yeah, man. So that's all it is. Yeah, I agree that cancel culture is losing its power. And again, I think that's because the average person, I think, is now feeling a little bit more emboldened and courageous and willing to speak the truth. This is, by the way, something I've noticed not just online, but as I've been traveling so much, in the past 12 months, I think I've been to about 16 different countries, and I've had so many private conversations with people by the thousands. And I have noticed a shift. I remember in 2020, 2021, like fear was kind of at an all-time high, man. People were really afraid to speak their minds and to do things, especially with all the isolation and all the pandemic stuff and all the government restrictions. People were feeling very closed in on. But now, and I think shout out to Elon for buying this platform and enabling this. That's actually a massive move. Um, it just allows people to share their thoughts and voice their ideas. And yeah, sometimes it means you might see or you might hear something that you don't like, but you know what as well, like we're all adults. We're all grown-ups. I imagine that everyone here, every single day, you see things you disagree with, you hear things you don't really like, or that you wish would be different or whatever. But I think as an adult, you have to be able to navigate the world and recognize that, people have different ideas and different beliefs, and sometimes things are going to offend you, and sometimes, but that's just how it is. If we all wanted to sort of ban or get rid of or deplatform every single idea in person that we don't agree with, then now we're not allowed to communicate, because what you'd find is that we all, even with the people you would love most dearly, there's going to be things you disagree with them on. You're going to have disagreements. You're going to argue sometimes and so on. So if that happens with the people you're closest to, of course, it's going to happen with the wider world.
I joined or Twitter at the time because Elon was buying it, but I still didn't quite understand the gravity of it then. It took me some time processing being on the platform, understanding what censorship was like prior to Elon taking over, reading articles about the Twitter files and how sort of our speech was being controlled by the government before I really understood how important it was that we have a platform, that we have a town square where the conversation can go two ways, not one, where it's not a narrative being pushed on us, from the powers that be. I think every government, is incentivized to just sort of get us in line, and that bothers me. So super super grateful that Elon bought this platform and made it available for us. Callie, why don't you ask a question?
Yeah, quick
Hey
question.
guys,
Carly, before you go,
sorry.
just a quick note for the audience, just a quick reminder. We have a full stage. We are full on the speaker panel. So we will be cycling these things through very quickly. So as you are done with your question, I'm going to drop you down and you're welcome to, again, request to speak again if you had a question. So this way we can give as many audience a chance to speak. And as you come up, please be ready, as Penny mentioned earlier too, and it would definitely help if you have your hand raised. That tells us that you have a comment or a question to ask. And Carly, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys, for having me here to actually take off the Maya's veil, that's made up lies that we were talking about. I would just have one question. So, to be very short, what would be the most sincere advice you would give to yourself when you started? I know this might seem like a stupid question or whatever, but I think some of us might find it useful. The answer, I mean.
Yeah, sure thing. Man, that's a difficult one. Honestly, I think it would just be words of encouragement. It would be, hey man, like persist, persevere, keep going. Keep going. Like you will get there, right? Success will happen. You just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. Don't get discouraged. I think one of the biggest problems that so many people have in so many areas and endeavors in life is simply that they give up, right? I think most people give up on most things way too early. Um, I don't know, maybe because people think that there's so many things where people sort of expect to have success in 6 months or 1 year or 2 years or even 5 years or whatever. I think a lot of things take over 10 years. A lot of things take over 10 years to really happen, and it can be very difficult, especially when you have people discouraging you, or you're not getting a lot of positive feedback, or it seems like no one is paying attention, or you're not being fairly rewarded and compensated for your effort. It's very, very easy to give up. This applies to everything. It could apply to starting a YouTube channel or a podcast. It could apply to a music career, starting a business, even being in a normal career, whatever it is, a weight loss diet, going to the gym, a new routine, trying to learn a language, anything. People just give up too early. So I think, I mean, I'm glad I had the foresight to know how long things could take and that I needed to persevere. But I think that would simply be my words of encouragement. Just any moment I was feeling down or discouraged or feeling like what I was doing was pointless or fruitless, it would just be, yeah, just keep on going, man. You're gonna make it.
Thank you so much for the answer. I suppose persevering and improving at the same time is what makes it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Callie, for your question. Thank you, Zuby. AJ, did you have a question?
Yes, I can go now, or I can go a little bit later, but since you brought it up, sure. Thank you, first of all, for doing the space, Penny. And Zuby, it's been a pleasure hearing you and meeting with you. I'm getting more and more familiar with you as a phenomenon, as a person, and there's so much of knowledge that I'm gaining. You mentioned earlier that your family is a large family, and they are predominantly based in England. And your siblings and your family, they all speak in a British accent, but you don't. You acquired the American accent and you kept it. So I have a question for you, and that is about: can you share a story behind your stage name Zuby? But if you could answer that in a British accent, I want to challenge you with your creative juices.
Wow. Okay, well, first of all, my proper name is Unzubechuku Olusebukaru Deswe. Um, my parents are from the Igbo tribe in Nigeria, And so I don't really have a British accent because I grew up in Saudi Arabia, and yeah, this is just how I talk. How's that effort?
It
Well,
was a.
I'm not.
Go ahead, AJ.
I was going to say no. I'm not going to get any brownie points for rating you on that, so I'm not going to answer that. But no, I think it's definitely way better than what I could have ever imagined to have attempted myself.
Yeah, yeah, it's so weird. Actually, putting on an English accent feels weird for me. I know exactly what they sound like, but yeah, I've had moments where I've sort of had one a little bit more. I probably sound more American again because I've been spending a lot of time in the States. But yeah,
You
I
very
don't
much
know, man.
sound like so much American. And I mean, I'd say if I had a quick follow up, like, do you ever get teased or picked on with by your family for kind of being different like that?
No, not at all, man. Not at all. I've no, no. It confuses people though. Whether I'm in the UK or I'm in the US or wherever I am, it does confuse people, especially as someone who talks for a living and raps for a living. Whenever someone hears my accent and then they're like, "Wait, this guy's British." Yeah, it's a long story because then also I have to explain to people that I'm not American, that and then they're like, "Oh, well, did you grow up in the USA?" And I'm like, "No, I grew up in Saudi Arabia." And they're like, "Okay, so why do you sound American?" It's kind of a long story. I've been explaining it to people for 30 something years at this point, but I do my best.
Every time I travel, I end up picking up a new accent. I was in Vegas with some Canadians for a weekend one time, and I left saying a boot and a all the time. I can't. I don't know. I don't know how you lived in the UK for years and didn't like heavily pick up on that accent.
Yeah, do you know what? I've noticed that some people pick up accents very quickly, and other people are much more resistant to them. I don't know what that is. I don't pick up accents I don't pick up accents easily at all. Like it's pretty sticky for me.
Oh my gosh, I'm so quickly influenced. If you were speaking in a British accent, probably by the end of this interview, I'd be speaking with a British accent. Let's go to Honey Badger next.
Hey, Penny, thank you. Hey, Zuby, good to see you. Actually, I'm glad that Callie brought up the, topic of perseverance. And this is kind of more for the audience, and this can be very specific. So at least you can know that I follow your work closely. How about that? So, Zuby actually wrote a song in 2018 called Perseverance, and essentially it's just about that, I'm not going to go pop, I'm not going to go soft. At the very end of the song, and again, this was in 2018, um, you wrote a big, basically a big homage to Jordan Peterson. Um, trying, I'm trying to put my meanings on the map. I gave you 12 rules for life. You kept my room clean. I'm the Jordan Peterson of rap. Now, that's pretty cool. So, moving forward, and I put this actually in the bubble, in 2022 when he got banned from the platform for his words about Elliot Sands, Ellen Page, you gave him a huge compliment about, the fact that he stuck to his guns and he refused to remove his tweets, which he responded with a lot of despair. His words kind of were along the lines of, I wish I would have just shut my mouth. I wish I hadn't said anything, et cetera, like this. So my two questions about that, because obviously that shows you can be on top of the world, you can do everything right, you can persevere through the worst of times, and you can even be given credit for that. But what happens next, and how has that changed, if at all, your perspective of Jordan Peterson? Thanks for letting me ask you that question, Zuby.
Wow. So, do you know what? Through all that, I'm not sure I perfectly caught the actual question.
So the question,
Just ask me the question.
okay, through, from 2018 when you wrote that to now, and giving that, like, that homage to Jordan Peterson, how do you see the way that he's been treated and the times that he's been really blackpilled recently? How do you see the situation now, and what has that taught you about perseverance? Is that a better way to frame it?
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Okay, so first of all, I'm gonna say unequivocally that I have massive love for Jordan Peterson, and I incredibly admire that man. Incredibly. I think that, look, the guy has made millions of people's lives better. He has helped millions of people, unquestionably. He has helped millions of people, men and women, to improve their lives, improve their relationships and their marriages, treat other people better, all of it through his YouTube videos, through his podcasts, through his books, through his speaking engagements, and so on and so forth. There are people who, what's really hard about I've got a big audience, but my audience is, there's people with much bigger audiences than me. And I think that oftentimes when you're in the public eye, people do forget that you are human. When I see some of the criticisms levied at Jordan Peterson recently, or even over the years, over the past sort of 6 or 7 years when he's been blowing up, is some of the criticisms are just so unreasonable. It's like they want the person to be perfect. And I think I understand it how people can be disappointed if, you've got someone who you really admire and then, they do or say something you don't like or you think goes against their, the things they've been preaching or whatever, and you want to tear them down. But look, I look at the world that we live in, and I look at all the things that are going on, and I see some of the nasty people out there, and I see some of the nastiness going on, and I think really Jordan Peterson is the guy you want to pick on. That's the guy you want to make the villain. Really? Like of all the bad guys in the world, you've got someone who's out here doing their best to use his voice, use his writing, use his intelligence to genuinely help people. And this is the person you want to go at. I'll be honest, I find it weird the way, obviously I get a lot of people online who, spend all their time like attacking me and criticizing me and trying to, tear me down and whatever. And sometimes I'm just like, man, pick a better target. Like whether or not you like agree with me on everything or you value all the things I do or you like my music or whatever, like I'm doing my best to try to help people. Like I'm not here every day, putting out hate and lying to everyone or spreading some vicious propaganda or inciting anything or whatever, or let alone doing any criminal activity. So yeah, big shout out to Jordan Peterson. He's one of my favorite human beings on earth who I have not actually met. There aren't that many of those, but he is one of them. He's actually been a massive personal inspiration to me, which is why I even mentioned him by name in that song. And I know he's been the same for lots of other people. So my view on him is still incredibly positive. I like him. His family has been through a lot. He has been through a lot. I mean, he almost died. His wife almost died. His daughter almost died. Like, man, they went through a hellish couple of years, man. And I think there's also people who think, oh, well, he's got money, he's got fame or whatever. So that's okay. And man, money and fame don't suddenly make people not feel pain anymore. People are always human. And I think it's really important for people to remember that, especially in the internet age, because we can all sometimes forget that we're interacting with human beings. And when you just see these little avatars on the screen and you're just sort of seeing people through your phone or through your laptop screen or whatever, you kind of forget there's other human beings on the opposite end of it. I myself need to remind myself of this sometimes, because again, I'm not a super emotional person. I'm quite the opposite, but I do have emotions. I am human. I do get angry, right? I do get upset sometimes. And yeah, you have to constantly remind yourself not to fall into that trap. And even if someone is being really nasty to you or forgets that you're a human being, um, if you can, it's best to not respond in kind. The block button is quite handy for that.
And, to your point, I would just like to just end with this. I pray for his continued perseverance because perseverance isn't a one and done. It's a everyday, it's a habit. And, you can see a person on the top and then they can fall and they have to persevere again, And so I really appreciate your perspective and thank you for letting me ask you that. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks.
Thanks, Honey Badger. Me answers. I think you may have been the first person that I brought up to the stage. Why don't you please ask your question?
Hi, Penny. Hi, AJ. Hi, Zuby. Thanks for letting me up. It's been a really great discussion, and I've really enjoyed hearing your perspective, Zuby, on everything. I really wanted to hear your perspective on Saudi Arabia since you grew up there and probably have more experience with it than most Americans. So I would really love to hear what you have to say about it in general.
All right. I've had people try to cancel me on this topic many times. Um, I like Saudi Arabia. I know I'm not allowed to say that. I know I'm not supposed to, but I had a great time there. It was an amazing place to grow up. I have not been back to the country in 15 years. I'd actually really like to go again because it's changed quite a lot since when I left. I left in 2008, and the country has liberalized in some good ways. Not running right off the deep end like we're doing in the West, but in some in some sensible, reasonable ways. It seems like the country has liberalized. They've changed some of the laws and attitudes around certain things, and it looks like it's moving in a good direction. But I would always caveat anything I say about Saudi Arabia with the fact that I grew up there as a foreigner, as an expat in a primarily expat community. So my experience is going to be different from a native Saudis or from anyone else. But it's also a bit of a weird caveat because that's true for everyone wherever they grow up, right? If I ask someone, hey, what was it like to grow up in the USA? Depending on who you ask that question, you're going to get a pretty different range of answers. So I don't think Saudi's any different in that regard. But I often say that I do think it's the most misunderstood country in the world. And I say that because it's one of the few countries that most people seem to have a strong opinion about, but barely anybody has been there. And it's very strange how strong some people's opinions are, despite the fact they haven't been there. What I would recommend to anyone who's remotely interested in Saudi or any of the other Gulf countries is to now that they do tourist visas. Like when I lived there, they didn't have tourist visas, so you couldn't kind of go and visit even if you wanted to. But they're very open to tourism now, which is quite remarkable as someone who grew up there in a time where that was unheard of. So, if you're interested in Saudi or the UAE or Bahrain, Qatar, whatever, I've been to all those countries. I'm actually going to UAE next week. It's going to be my fourth time there this year. Um, go check it out. Go check it out. I think everyone I know who has been pleasantly surprised. I know a lot of people who have I've got a lot of DMs and emails from people who went and visited Saudi or they went and visited Dubai or whatever, and they're just like, wow, actually it was really different from what I'd heard or what I grew up thinking or whatever. So, everyone's gonna have a different experience. But I'm a fan. I'm actually a fan of the Gulf countries. I think there's a lot of things that Western nations can learn from them, just like I think there's a lot of things that they can learn from Western nations, which they're actually in the process of doing. I think, they're cherry picking the good stuff, and they're integrating that slowly into their societies with positive results. So I think I'm generally a believer that every nation can learn from other nations. I don't think there's any country that has it all figured out. I don't think the US has it all figured out, obviously. The UK doesn't have it all figured out, obviously. Saudi doesn't have it all figured out. There's no nation that's just kind of got it all worked out and everything is perfect and nothing can be improved. But if you can maintain the best elements of your culture whilst learning from other ones and learning and integrating some of those things, I think that's really the best way to I think that's the best way to actually create a society that's fair and fair and balanced. You don't want to kind of go too far to any extreme. Otherwise, you always end up with either some type of chaos or some type of oppression. I think there is a healthy balance that can be reached. And yeah, I think we're getting there.
I think it's like it's very similar to being humble as a person, right? Like if you're humble as a nation, then you can cherry pick the best things that are happening outside of the nation. If you're humble as a person and you critically think about what people tell you, the feedback that you get from others, then you're able to grow, right? So it's important, I think, at all different levels, whether we're talking about individuals or political parties or countries or whatever else, that we're humble and then we're open to conversation and hearing the other side, because you're right, none of us have it figured out. That's impossible. Living on this planet Earth is too complex. There's too many different variables. None of us can have it all figured out. But as a whole, we've done all right for thousands of years. So hopefully, we can keep that going. Let's see, Jordan, you've had your hand raised for a long time. Please ask a question.
Hi, thanks. Zuby, big fan of yours. I'm just curious. Well, two things. One is, what is your opinion on people who think that it's just we should respect other people's pronouns because it's a polite thing to do. And then also on that, how do you, I guess, keep so chill on the internet around so much negative feedback, towards you or whatever?
Yeah, sure thing. I'm going to address those in reverse order. The way that I remain chill is that I stay grounded in reality. So I don't base my first of all, it's important to know that 99% of the feedback I get is positive. The 1% is loud, and given the size of my audience and how many people I reach, that 1% is still significant. But the vast majority of people who know me or who have heard of me really like and appreciate me. I've never had a bad interaction in the real world. I've met fans and supporters in dozens and dozens of different countries, hundreds of different cities. Like I've got love everywhere, and it's always positive. So yeah, stay rooted in reality. So I don't let it go to my head, nor do I let it, a mean comment cause me to curl up in a ball in the fetal position and become anxious and depressed or anything like that. Right? I'm rooted in reality. I've got great friends, great family. I know my self-worth. I know my value. I'm close to God, so I'm kind of unshakable in that regard. The other question was about pronouns. Okay, so firstly, I don't think it's polite to lie, and I don't think it's polite to try to compel other people into speech. Um, so I don't go with the notion that it's polite to use quote unquote preferred pronouns. So if I'm in a conversation and I want all of you in this chat to address me as J, right? And I say that if you don't call me Jem and refer to me as that in the third person, then you're being impolite to me. I think that's narcissistic on my part. I think that's me making an imposition on you. The point of language is that to describe things accurately, right? And you don't get your own pronouns. That's simply not how language works. Pronouns are used to accurately refer to someone in the third person, um, by their sex, or at least the sex they appear at. And when you're having a one-on-one conversation with someone, you don't use pronouns anyway, right? If you're talking one-on-one to someone, you don't call them he, him, her, she, her. You say you, or you say their name. So I think this is a tactic that's used by the wokies inadvertently or intentionally often as a power play, right? Because they want you to kind of trip up on these words, but you don't get your own pronouns simply, just like you don't get your own adjectives, you don't get your own nouns and special nouns and verbs and whatever. I have many adjectives I would love for you guys to refer to me as, but I cannot compel you to do so. And I can't say that, if you don't call me smart, jacked, and handsome and wonderful, that you're somehow imposing upon me. It's totally up to you if you want to call me that. So, um, and so, look, the thing is, in the real world, people are going to just use whatever pronoun that you look like. If you look like a man, people are going to say he and him. If you look like a gal, people are going to say she and her. That's just actually what happens in the real world. People don't actually do these whole like sort of pronoun routines and things like that. That's all internet stuff, but it's not real.
I can't blame you for wanting to be called smart, jacked, and handsome, but as soon as you try to force me to do it, that's where, I see a problem. So, let's
Yeah,
see.
well, we already established your bigotry, so
Biggest bigot on this platform right here. Health is wealth, or health uncensored. Please ask your question. We have about 20 minutes before I have to go. I assume Zuby's going to be running out of time before long too. Hopefully, Zuby, you can make it those last 20 minutes. This has been a lot of fun. By the way, I definitely want to thank you again in case we run out of time, because I definitely appreciate you coming on and doing this space with me. Giving the opportunity for all of our common fans or common followers to come up and ask questions too is so cool. So, Health Uncensored, please join the discussion.
Hi, Penny. Hi, Zuby. Very interesting discussion. Thanks for allowing me to ask a question. My question is in regards to gender ideology and gender dysphoria as well, but I'd like to preface that with a statistical fact. In the United States right now, men's testosterone levels are the lowest they've ever been in recorded history. They keep getting lower. The trend continues. My question is, what role do you think hormones play in gender identity and gender dysphoria, or do they play a role? Is there a correlation between men's testosterone levels dropping and gender confusion? Thank you for allowing me to ask a question.
Yeah, so the testosterone issue you're talking about is one of the biggest unspoken problems that we're dealing with, along with the massive decline in fertility and the birth gap. These are massive issues that few people are aware of and talking about. How much do I think it plays into the sort of mainstreaming of gender ideology? Honestly, I think very little. I think it might be a tiny contributing factor, but I don't think, I think it's the ideology itself and the way that it's being pushed on all these different levels and the way that people are being sort of coerced and bullied into it and the way that it's spreading through social media. And I think that's like, as well as academia, I think that's the primary driver. And then I think what you mentioned, I think the decline in testosterone as a whole is a massive problem for a whole host of other things, but I don't think it's a big contributor in what we're talking about right now. It might be like a 1% amplifier.
Thanks, Zuby. Let's go to Miss Silence next.
So much for giving me the mic. I highly admire you and what you do on the platform. Hi, Zuby. I actually am newer here, and I've seen and I thought it was just a
Your mic's breaking up, Miss Silence. Maybe find a good spot and try real quick. Otherwise, we'll pass to someone else.
did you hear?
No, you're still breaking up pretty bad. Sorry, Miss Silence. I'll come back to you in a minute. Maybe if there's a place where you get better reception or something, we can try. While we're waiting for that, Kasturi, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you very much, Penny, for this brilliant space. Thank you, Zuby, for being a wonderful human being. I'm truly grateful and humbled to be able to ask a question and meet you on this platform. Art plays a key role in shaping people's view of the world, being an artist. And in the 21st century, science fiction is arguably the most important genre of all, for it shapes how much people understand about AI, bioengineering, and climate change. My question to you is in two parts. We are moving more and more from interdependence to independence. So there's a certain kind of singularity. What would be your advice for an 8-year-old, the most important life skill to have? What preparedness does this child need to have to see a world of 2040? And the second part of the question is, you talked about lies and how it has been amplified in our era. How do we amplify trust in individuals and institutions? Thank you.
Well, two great questions right there. The first one is difficult. I don't feel like I'm an uncle to many, but I'm not a father yet, so I sort of feel underqualified to answer this one, but I'll do my best. So, what would be the biggest lesson for an 8-year-old? Wow. Are we talking like for a specific area? Are we talking like careers? Are we talking relationships? What are we talking about?
I think it's the holistic, what the life is that he or she is seeing right now. What is the change? What is the preparedness? What should she learn or he learn? Not everybody would be coders if we are thinking everybody in
Okay.
this. Yes. So what skill set? Emotional intelligence, or is it
Okay.
intellectual intelligence? Thank you.
Okay, I have two answers on this one. The first one is I think learning how to learn. I think if you can learn to be a good learner, then you're very adaptable and you can pick up new skills, whatever that skill might be, right? We don't have a crystal ball. We can't see into the future and know what it's going to be exactly like in 2040 or 2050. But if you're someone who is adaptable and is able to pick up new skills quickly, then you're always going to stand in good stead. The second thing I would say is communication. Um, Communication, no matter what job you do, no matter in this world, we're always communicating with other people, right? We live in a world full of human beings, and we always communicate. So to get become good at speaking, become good at listening, become good at reading and comprehending what you're reading, become good at writing. If you're a genuinely good communicator, and those are pretty rare actually, if you think about it. Not that many people are excellent communicators. If you can become an excellent communicator, then that will also stand you in very good stead because then you can use your voice, you can use your words, you can understand other people better and empathize with them better. You can solve more problems. Anything that has to do with human beings, which is most things, you're going to be able to navigate a lot better if you are above average in communication. If you can become excellent at listening and all these other things, then I think that whichever way the world goes, those those skills, that skill stack is always going to be helpful. I know for myself personally, being good at communicating is literally it's my job. It's my jobs. Every aspect of my career is communication. So I do my best to be a very good communicator, whether I'm just listening or I'm writing or I'm reading or I'm speaking. I can do all those things well above the average, and that has helped me a lot in life.
Thank you
I,
very much.
I love that. Teaching people to teach themselves is sort of why my account exists. And I would echo what you said about communication because that never goes out of style, right? Like it doesn't matter what happens in the world, whatever is new, whatever you learn, whatever needs to be learned, if you can communicate, both in terms of listening and also in terms of broadcasting, I think there's probably nothing more valuable to help keep you adaptable and also those that you care about and those around you, those that you have influence on, whether you're a boss or a parent
Mhm.
or something like that.
Yeah, and it goes way beyond the work world as well, right? We all have relationships with people. People have friendship relationships, family relationships, romantic relationships, whatever relationships you have. If you're good at communicating, then your relationships are going to be better.
That's right. That's what it's all about. Maze, do you have a question?
Hi, yes, Penny, and thanks for bringing me up. Hi, Zuby. So, in addition, I know you guys were talking about education earlier, and I think in addition to the quacky indoctrination that's happening right now, I also think that the way it's set up is preventing perhaps children from being able to embark on their genius code, like what's unique to them, like what they love and they're just great at. And so, Zuby, I just, wanted to ask you what your genius code is, and when do you think that it became obvious to you that that is your, your genius? If you don't mind sharing a personal story.
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, anyone who knew me as a child would have known me for drawing. I actually wanted to be a cartoonist when I was a kid. I spent so much of my childhood just drawing. I was just drawing cartoons all the time, inventing different characters, just being creative. That was the first creative thing I got into before music. And then I got into music playing piano and trombone when I was younger. I wish I'd continued them, but I stopped. But at least I picked up rapping. So I guess for me, it would be that it's the creativity. And then what I was just talking about is communication. And then creativity and communication are the two, what did you call it? Genius code. I like that. That's a cool term. I think for me, I think that's where it really lies for me personally.
All
Amazing.
right.
Thank you.
We got about Yeah, thank you, Maze. We have about 10 minutes left. I'll make it through a couple more questions and then we'll let Zuby promote anything that he wants before we leave. Let's see. Diligent, I'll let you ask another question. What do you got?
Thank you for allowing me to ask a second question. Very humbled, sir. Zuby, with spaces kind of growing on X, I'm curious if you plan on expanding your platform and maybe your podcast more to like an X-centric, uh, episodes.
We'll see. We'll see. Honestly, um, it might depend even on like a financial incentive. As it currently stands, I don't know how much sense it makes for me to do that. I think I might be kind of shooting myself in the foot from a business perspective if I were to do that, but we'll see. A lot of stuff is happening with this platform. I chat with Elon, via DMs, and I know that stuff is always happening. A lot has changed even since we did the interview a couple of months ago. So if it makes sense for me to do it, then I'd be happy to do it. I don't have the plans right now, but I'd be totally open to the idea. So we'll see, man.
When you were interviewing Elon, he gave a lot of information about like the roadmap of X and the direction that he wanted to take it. And it's been interesting just over a few months to see some of that play out. Definitely some of the things he talked about. There's still a lot of room to improve on. Is there anything in particular, Zuby, that you're looking forward to in terms of changes that he discussed with you and maybe hasn't happened yet?
Yeah, I would love to see a better sort of media library. So the thing I do wonder with all the changes with X though is, like I've been on Facebook since 2004, which is unreal. I've been on Facebook for most of my life, so I'm like in the first 0.1% of people on Facebook, and with Facebook and even with Instagram, I think part of the one thing I don't like about them is that they're trying to do everything. Um, I used to like Facebook more when it wasn't trying to be and do everything. And I used to like Instagram more when it wasn't also trying to be Snapchat and TikTok and YouTube, as well as being Instagram and Facebook. So I do have I like the idea of X being this sort of very holistic app, but I also don't want it to sort of lose the core Twitter personality. Do you see what I mean? And so I don't know how they're planning to bring all of these features without sort of diluting the core of what the app is and what it's been for the past 15 or so years. But I'm curious to see what they do with it. But I would like to see some type of media library because, like, if you upload a video, for example, whether it's a podcast or it's a music video or it's just a video of you chatting or something, there's not really like a library. There's no sort of library or searchable way to re-access that video. It's just like, okay, I posted that 2 weeks ago and it's kind of out there in the ether, but there's no easy way for people to find it again, like there is on YouTube, for example, where each video is indexed there properly. So something to do with the media. Again, I don't know exactly how they're going to do it, but some type of like video library, content library sort of thing, as long as it doesn't distract from the core functionality, I think that would be cool.
I've heard Elon recommend that people use their highlights in order to accomplish something like that. You add whatever your most recent podcast is as something to your highlights. But I definitely agree. It feels like when you create something that could be evergreen content, something that, may have value for weeks or months or even years to come, that it gets very quickly lost on X, and that takes away from the ability to host things like that here, at least from a business point of view. It's a good way to draw attention when you first release it, but then after that, it's gone. So I definitely, as I build my presence here, hope for some of the same thing. Let's see. Juan, you were up here hoping to ask a question earlier, brought you back up. We have a few more minutes. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Hi, Penny. Can you hear
Juan, you
me?
can. Yep, loud and clear.
Perfect. Well, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, AJ, for all your help. Hi, Subi. How are you? Subi, I don't
Always
know if
blessed,
you
man.
agree with me that mental illness got worse after the pandemic. So my question for you is: using all your platforms, how can you support the mental health like awareness to see how can you help all these people with mental illness?
Um, okay, my answer here might sound controversial to the more sensitive types, but I think that people need to. I think most of it is lifestyle related. No, I don't think. I know that most of it is lifestyle related. So people need to fix their nutrition. People need to fix their lifestyle habits. People need to exercise regularly. People need to put themselves in a good environment. And a lot of what people are calling mental illness or mental health problems will be alleviated. I'm aware there are genuine mental illness conditions that exist, but a lot of the times when people talk about mental health, they're, kind of talking about things that are lifestyle induced, right? They're not happy with their lives, or they're not moving their bodies enough, or they're eating garbage, they're not sleeping enough, they're not drinking enough water. All these type of things where if you actually remedied them, you get to the core of the problem. So I don't think we need any more mental health awareness, man. I think people are very, very aware of mental health more than ever before, yet it keeps declining because a lot of people are just not happy with their lives, or they're doing things which are directly harming them. So I tend to focus on what I think is more at the root. Obviously, I'm always promoting exercise and physical fitness, and I'm promoting optimism and people to think, think freely, but also, root themselves in the truth. I'm always encouraging people to put themselves in better environments, even if it means moving city or moving country. I'm like an OG passport bro. So, all these things. I think if you're I don't know many people. I've not come across many situations where someone is eating a nutritious diet, exercising regularly, surrounded by, they have loving friends and family. They enjoy what they do for a living. They're not spending like 12 hours a day on social media. They're getting enough sleep. They're drinking enough water. I'm not coming across many people who tick all those boxes, period. But I'm not coming across many people who tick all these boxes and then they have some type of mental health issue. Normally, there's something very fundamentally wrong with their lifestyle, which sort of makes it obvious to me why they might be feeling depressed or anxious and so on. So I think you tackle these things one at a time. And that's where I wish more of the conversation was on, because I don't think that kind of just talking about mental health and telling everyone to using all this therapy language all the time. I maybe it helps some people, but I think there's a lot of people it's not helping. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes. Can I include the woke people and the gender ideology as a mental health problems?
Well, it's a truth problem. Again, of course they're going to have a mental health problem because it's a lifestyle problem,
Mm,
right? If you're communicating all of these conflicting messages to people and you're confusing them about their own self-identity, then of course they're going to like that's like an attack on an individual. If you don't know who you are down to the core, you don't even know what gender you are, then you're going to struggle to live a happy life, man. Like these things are very fundamental, and I think if we were truly compassionate, that's why I talk about the truth, right? I think if we want to be truly compassionate as a society, then think of how crazy it would be. Imagine if you had a young woman with anorexia or bulimia, and she thought that she was fat, even though she's like really, really skinny, and she has this self-image of herself which is not accurate. You wouldn't want to encourage her and everyone else to go along with that delusion and that falsehood and encourage her, actually, yeah, you are too big. Yeah, actually you should be eating less, you should be purging, you should be doing that would be considered insane and cruel. But when it comes to, I don't know, a boy saying that he's a girl or a man saying that he's a woman or whatever, instead of actually like going through these things step by step and trying to get them to the truth and get them to be comfortable in their body, the message being pushed from society is, okay, we need to like, chop you up, or we need to put you on hormones, or we need to do this and that, and then we need to get everyone else to change their behavior to accommodate you. That's not how it works. You don't help people by trying to force everyone else to completely change everything down to denying reality to conform to them. Sometimes you do have to conform to the world, or if you're not going to conform to the world, you have to accept that, okay, I'm doing this thing differently, but reality still exists, and you can't force people to do all these things. But I actually think a lot of the narratives we have in society are encouraging mental illness and encouraging mental health problems. So I think we have this weird um, oxymoron where we're talking about mental health a lot, but there's things actively being promoted that are guaranteed to make people's mental health worse. And I see a lot of that.
we're all beautiful humans here, but we're not entitled for other people to sort of cater to us, right? Like we have to take care of ourselves. And I think that's where a lot of this woke shit comes from, is people feeling entitled. AJ, you've had your hand raised, but I have to wrap it up. So Zuby, I wanted to thank you so much for joining today. This was an awesome conversation. I hope, we can get together and talk again in the future. Anything that you want to promote today before I close the space?
Yeah, sure thing. You know what? I was actually going to just a lot of people don't know this, but because I barely ever promote it. I only really open it up like once or twice a year. But if you are trying to grow on social media and X in particular, and you need some advice and like real tangible help, then send me a DM. I want to help some more entrepreneurs and business owners in particular. People who are offering real stuff of value to the world. I want to help them to grow their accounts. I've actually helped people to grow their accounts by hundreds of thousands of combined followers. It's something I do very low key, but that invitation is open. I'm gonna make it public soon. I only want to work with a handful of people, but if you're on this call and that sounds of interest and you're willing to invest in that, then shoot me a message. And then besides that, yeah, thank you all for being here. Honestly, we've been talking for like 2 hours. You guys could be anywhere. You could be doing anything, and the fact that you tuned into this and wanted to listen, it means a lot to me. Shout out to you, Penny, for organizing this, and honestly, just thank you all for the love. I'm not going to promote too much. You guys know where to find me. You can find my music. You can find my podcast, Real Talk with Zuby. Links to everything are on my profile in my bio, so you know where to find me. And yeah, thanks for the love, man. And I hope this inspires and encourages people to just give you a little nudge in a more positive direction, because God knows we need more positivity in the world right now.
Yes, we do. And I appreciate you bringing it, Zuby. Everyone, I'll promote myself for a second. If you like these spaces, if you want to see more of them, please subscribe. Please follow Zuby, follow all the speakers that ask great questions today. If you are not busy, I'll be jumping into NFT God space next. So join me there. Everyone, have a great rest of your day. Bye.
This space was downloaded via spacesdown.com. Visit to download your spaces today.